Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to mix some acoustic drums. Let's go. Before we jump into the DAW and get started, there are a few common mistakes that I want to go over before I show you this mix process when it comes to mixing a drum kit that is fully mic'd. The first thing that people really get wrong is not treating the entire drum set as a full instrument. They say, oh, I can hear hi-hat and the snare mic, or the overheads are picking up more than the cymbals. Yes, that is the point. Yes, you are going to be doing a lot of individual mixing on each mic. However, it is important to just think of the drums as one complete instrument. Starting off with that mindset is really going to help you be better at mixing the kit. You go in and you just gate the crap out of everything, it won't sound like a real instrument. It'll sound really strange. It's also important to let your snare be a snare. It's going to have a little bit of ring, it's going to have a little bit of sizzle, and that is okay. We don't have to EQ a snare to death to make it sound like an instrument that it's not. And now that we are in the right state of mind for mixing a drum kit, let's jump into the DAW and I'll show you how it works. Today we're going to be mixing drums for Harlequin Jones' Brutally Honest. You may remember this song from my earlier mastering video. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. Jesse, the drummer for this band, is very consistent in his playing. All of his hits are really nice and clean. He does a lot of ghost notes and there's a lot of nuance to the drumming. This is the main reason why we don't want to go in and just gate everything out. And that is because you lose all those nuances that a drummer worked really hard to put in. If you're going in and gating the snare so that the hi-hat doesn't show up in it, you might lose some of these ghost notes as well. This is why I picked this particular song, because of that. I wanted to show you a great example of what you're ruining when you're over mixing the drum kit. So here is that drum set, just the mics, no gain staging, no panning, no EQ, no mixing whatsoever. This is how they sound. First thing that I'm going to do is go in and I'm just going to highlight every single track and I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. And I'm doing this because, as you noticed maybe on this left-hand side, we did experience clipping from just the drum mics and we haven't put any other instruments in yet. So the first thing I'm doing is just the first set of gain staging, which is turning everything down. This is also the order in which I like to put everything. I put overhead left, overhead right, hi-hat, ride, bass drum or kick drum, snare, snare bottom, rack tom, floor tom, and the drum bus. We'll go over drum bus later. But this is how I like the order to be because I'm going to mix it left to right like I do everything. So we're going to start with this left overhead here, and we're going to mute every other piece of the drum set. Now, this is where you want to choose. Do you want drummer's perspective or audience perspective? This is the mix engineer's choice. It is like Pepsi or Coke, mayonnaise, Miracle Whip. There's no right answer. It's just what you prefer to do. Now, I have been a drummer for 30 years, and I really like drummer's perspective, right-handed drummer's perspective, because when I sit down and I want to play along to a song, everything's in the right order for how I'm playing it. And most people don't notice what perspective you used, except for drummers that want to play along. But sometimes if you really want that live feel, you can do audience perspective so that the audience listening to it feels like they're on the other side of the stage. Totally preference, no right or wrong answer there. But because I have chose drummer's perspective, I need to make sure that everything is in that same order. Another thing you want to do is make sure that the drummer has labeled it the way you want it. So this drummer labeled it overhead left being from drummer's perspective. So you're going to hear the hi-hat on the left. You're going to hear the rack toms on the left. And you're going to hear the floor tom and the ride on the right. So make sure before you start that you listen to the whole track, line it up with what other instruments are going on, and make sure that your overheads are labeled correctly. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this left and I'm going to crank it, pan it 100% to the left. Then I'm going to pull up this EQ. This is Infinity EQ by Slate, but you can use any EQ that you want to. I tend to start with a preset just because it draws all the dots for me, but these presets don't work on everything. So I chose the Rock Overheads Big, but my EQ looks completely different than how it started. I go ahead and do a little bit of a high pass to just get rid of the muddy stuff that I don't want. I boost the kick drum area. I do a little bit of cutting in the mids because that's going to be where my snare is going to really pop through. And then I just raise the highs a little bit, and that's just to get a little bit of shine on the cymbal. You don't want to crank this too much. If you're trying to get your cymbals to cut through the mix better, just turn up the fader. Don't crank the crap out of the highs because they can get really tinny really fast. And this is how that sounds with the EQ. You're going to hear it completely out of your left speaker. Before. After. Real subtle. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute the other one. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to EQ this one a little bit different, just so you get a little bit of range. This one's also picking up other instruments like the ride and the floor tom. So you want to go ahead and keep that in mind when you're EQing this one. You'll notice I'm not putting any compression on these overheads yet. All I'm doing is EQing. The reason is you can overcompress cymbals very easily. And once you start to overcompress them, they get really tinny and sharp. The ring out doesn't go quite as well for you. So we're only going to be putting compression on our drum bus. So leave these alone. Do not compress them. EQ only. All right. And then I'm going to turn that one 100% to the right. Now what I'm noticing is that the one on the right is slightly louder than the one on the left. So just because they have a dead set on the meter as the same here, so this -903, doesn't mean that they're actually the same volume coming out. You have to use your ears. So we're going to turn this one slightly down. And that sounds much more even to me. You're also doing different boosting and cutting in the EQ, which can also change the volume, because when you boost, the volume goes up. So really use your ears to make sure those overheads are as even as possible. Next, we're going to go to the hi-hat mic. And all we're going to do is we're going to EQ. And I'm just getting rid of some kick drum mud here, some low end, and I'm just adding a little bit of sparkle into the hi-hat. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pan that to the left, about 48% here, and move the meter to taste. It is really easy to make your hi-hats too loud because you got the overhead picking up the highs and then you have a hi-hat mic. So it's really important that you just blend that into taste and use the meters to blend it. Don't do any boosting or cutting or compression. Just use the meters and blend it in. Real simple. Sounded way better already. All right, next we're going to get our ride here. I didn't use a preset for the ride. I just know that I only want some severe high cut and some high end boost, and that's it. So that's what I've done here. I've cleared out the mud and I've just boosted a little bit of the high end. And then we are going to pan that opposite of the hi-hat. So we're just going to do about 50% to the right. So I went to the section of the song where the ride is a little bit louder because no drummer is going to be playing on the hi-hat at the same time as the ride. So we need to make sure that we're evening that out. So this section of the song, the ride was much louder. All right, now we're going to move on to the kick drum. This particular mic setup only had the one kick mic, which is totally fine. You don't always need like a sub mic and an outer mic and all this stuff. You can use one mic and make it sound pretty good. So myths about kick drums is that if you want the low end or you want them to punch through the mix, you have to boost all the low end. That is a noob mistake. First, we're going to go through and we're going to actually high pass a little bit of this mud out. This is kind of the ringy section of the kick. This is where the mud lies here, but make sure that when you're playing the kick that you're listening and moving these things around so that you can hear where that is. This is kind of the punch slap area here for the low end section, but all your break through the mix is going to come in this high end here. I like to use like 3 bands and just kind of boost a little bit of the frequencies. And this helps the slap sound of the kick, that really like slappy sound, helps to cut through the bass in the mix. The bass in this mix is so low. It's like this really low tone that I really wanted this kick to be really slappy. So in order to make it slappy, I did a lot of high-end boosting here. You can go through and pick a preset. I usually end up changing this to my taste through my ears. Not every rock kick preset is going to work. A lot of them are preset for like VST kicks or digital stuff. A real live kick drum is going to have a lot more boom to it. It's going to have some ring, and it's going to have a picking up of some other stuff in the room. So make sure when you choose a rock drum preset that you're really listening to it and making sure that that's what you really want. This is a little snapshot of my EQ here. Next, I just wanted to add a little tiny bit of compression just to keep the kicks more even. So I put the tiniest amount of threshold here. It's just like -7, and then my ratio is 2.5. I have a medium attack and release, and a little bit of drive here, and a slightly little bit of makeup gain. But as I play it, you'll be able to see that this meter isn't hitting that hard at all. And the reason is he goes boop, boop, bop, boop, 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 bap, boop. And that second kick, that boop, bop, bop, is intentional. He does not want it to be as loud as the other kicks. So we're picking up that nuance by having it not smash everything to make it that level. Sometimes I don't use any compression. It just depends on the song. Next, we're going to move on to the snare drum. I know that this is everybody's dreaded thing to mix, but it's really not that deep. So we're going to start with the snare top. And as you'll notice, I'm keeping everything on as I'm unmuting. I want to hear it all in context. This is one instrument. I don't want to mute something, EQ it, unmute, and realize I need to do the work twice. We're mixing this as a whole instrument. So here is our snare. Here is the EQ for the snare. Now, you could pick a preset rock snare top just because it draws in the dots for you, but you're going to change it, I guarantee you. What you can do on a snare drum to hear if it's ringing too much or anything like that is you can literally take any one of these and you can boost it way up and slide it all the way across, and you'll start to hear where that ring starts to come out. For this, I'm going to solo it so I can play this for you. So let's start over here and we'll play it, and I'll move it across. Let's turn that up just so you can hear it. I heard the ring right about here. So that is why I just dipped it a little bit in that same area. I also want a little bit of the body of the snare, which you could hear right here. And I want that crack coming in. This snare is a Black Beauty, so it's a really good snare. And I just really wanted that crack crispy to come through. Let's turn this back down and unmute everything else. We're also seeing just like a little bit of mud down here, so I'm just going to do a little pass. That sounds great. All right, now with a snare, we're going to put our compressor right on there. And for the snare, I want the control. So I want those big, big hits to just be a little bit more contained. And I also want those ghost notes to come to the surface a little bit. So I have quite a big threshold, ratio of 2.5, and a little bit of makeup gain here. And to see what it's doing, just watch the meter right here. So what's happening is those big hits are getting grabbed, and the ghost notes are coming up with the makeup gain. Sounds fantastic. All right, now we're just going to grab the snare bottom And this, I just put a little bit of EQ on it and I blend it into taste. It's like the supporting role. It's the supporting actress in the snare realm. So you don't need to crank this thing up as loud as the snare top. You just use it to create that nice, bright sound. So we just did some high passing here, a little boost in the meat, and a little high boost here to get those snares to kind of crackle through. And then we're going to blend it to taste. So here we go. I'll solo these for you. You can see how this is just the supporting role here. And another thing you can do to make the sound of your snare just a little bit wider is you can actually just pan this any direction like 10%. And this will actually make your snare sound a little bit wider in the mix. And you are hearing all that hi-hat bleed in the snare, right? So what happens when I turn this on? Do you hear it anymore? Why? Because we're mixing a whole instrument. And if you were to sit there and gate all of that hi-hat out of the snare, it would sound weird because you'd be gating out some ghost notes. So don't worry about it. Let it go. And if it sounds good, it is good. You don't have to EQ the crap out of a snare or get it to sound super duper perfect because you also have a snare coming through the overheads. You have the snare coming through the hi-hat mic. You have it all coming everywhere. So just get any really annoying frequencies and boost any frequencies that you like and then call it a day. It should not take you hours. Also, one of the reasons that EQing a snare takes you so long is because you have it on solo. Take it off solo and mix it with everything else. Pro tip. All right, next we have our toms. Thinking about the drums and where they are. You can see a drum kit behind me here. So that is how we are going to pan our toms. Right now we have one rack tom. We don't have two on this kit. We have one and we have a floor. Go ahead and we're going to pan our rack tom to the left there. And if I occasionally get a left and right mixed up and you see me going one direction and I say a different direction out loud, I sincerely apologize. I'm very bad at my lefts and rights when I'm talking. Watch what I'm doing, not what I'm saying. So we're going to unmute this and you guessed it, just putting an EQ on it. I really like this preset, this rack tom preset by Slate Digital. I only adjust it a little bit, but I really like how it picks up a lot of the boominess and the hit from the high end. Now that we have it panned and we have a little bit of EQ, we're going to go to a section that uses the rack tom. That's the best way to do it. It's used a lot right here. And we're going to go ahead and listen to it there and gain stage. We also use it here. I do want it to kind of cut through the mix. That's why it's a little bit louder. When we put the other instruments on, we can always go back and adjust our kick, snare, and toms to make sure that they're loud enough or need to be turned down. Next, we have our floor tom, which I'm going to put about 75% to the right. Then I EQ'd it. Again, these are choices based on, this was like a ringing in the floor tom. This, I really wanted that high sound to come out. And the low end, I wanted it to be boosted because it's a floor tom. It's a really boomy thing. Okay, now that we have the rack tom on the left and the floor tom to the right, we are going to be able to hear the toms go do on the ears. So make sure you're wearing headphones. You probably are because you're learning to mix, but here we go. You should be able to hear rack tom into the floor tom on this fill. Now I want to make sure that that rack tom and that floor tom are a little bit even in volume. So I'm going to turn the floor tom down just a little bit. We are using our ears. Turn the rack tom up a little bit. And we can also adjust this later when we hear the rest of the music. All right, now let's talk about our drum bus. So in Reaper, you create a track. Any track in Reaper can be a bus. In any other DAW, you would create a bus and then send those tracks to that number bus. Make sure you label it drum bus so that you know where things are going. And we just took every single one of these mics and dropped it into this drum bus here. Here's where we're going to put a little bit of compression, a little bit of EQ, and I really like this Revival plugin by Slate Digital. It just really helps beef up a drum kit, and I really like using it. Here we can also do any kind of like a makeup gain to the whole drum set if we wanted to, and we'll do a quick before and after. So this is before. And here is after. Sounds fantastic. Much better than what we started with at the beginning. Again, the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to overcompress cymbals. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to do your whole mix and you want the cymbals to sound really nice in the mix. Then you're going to go ahead and go into the mastering process. They're going to add more compression there. And as more compressors pile on top of these real cymbals, they're going to have that like really tinny, nasty sound that's very unpleasant to the ear. We want everything to sound natural. Then finally on this drum bus, we are going to put on some reverb, and this just glues everything together and makes the drums sound like they were recorded on a stage or a really nice room. Depending on what you're going for, you can adjust the reverb. I have this about 75% on the dry wet, the decay very low, and I have the high reverb kind of turned down a little bit. Here's one thing. We want to make sure that this pre-delay is at 0. You don't want pre-delay on drums. You can do it and see how it sounds, but how I've seen is when you have pre-delay, you have something coming in before the drums are supposed to hit. This creates a little bit of off-time feeling. And you always want with drums to make sure they're perfectly in the pocket and on time. So I expanded the width a little bit, turned the decay down, and this is what that sounds like before the reverb. And here's with it on. Now I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. I think it's a little too much. I'm going to turn the whole drum bus down just a little bit. I'm going to turn the kick drum up just a little bit. I think that sounds fantastic. Now I'm going to turn all the music on, then I can blend this in with the music to taste here. All right, sounding great. There it is, my super quick tutorial on mixing drums. Now you might be saying, Jam, those drums are fully mic'd. I record in my bedroom and I only have 4 pre's, 2 pre's, and I want to record my entire drum kit. Well, if that's you and you want to know how to mix your drums that may not have a full mic setup, go ahead and drop in the comments how many mics you're trying to use in your drum kit, and I will make a tutorial based on what everybody needs to know. But in the meantime, maybe check out one of my other videos.